We've been working with solving quadratic equations. We've solved them by graphing, we've solved them by factoring, and today we're going to solve by completing the square. Update your table of contents and your title page. Okay, the stuff highlighted in yellow is the directions of how to complete the square, so copy that down. And then we've got some more directions, more of an example with explanations on how to complete the square. So copy down everything in yellow. And then they've got directions what would be the value needed to make it a perfect squared. The answer is 64 because 16 divided by 2 squared is 64. And then you would add those two together. And then you would finish this out. I'm going to explain this a lot more in just a little bit here. Okay, so let's solve one by completing the square. So the first thing that we need to do is see if this is a perfect square trinomial. Can I take half of this number, so 14 divided by 2, which is 7, and if I square that, will it equal 49? In this case it does, so we're ready to go. We can rewrite this as x plus, since that's a plus right there, we'll use a plus, the number that was being squared to make 49, so 7 squared, equals 64. Okay, let's just review. How the heck did I just get that? If we were going to factor it, what adds to 14 and times to 49? That's 7 times 7. So there's a special rule that if we check this part right here, we can just jump to that step and we don't need to set up our factor tree. So we would know that it's x plus 7 and x plus 7, or x plus 7 squared. Okay, now we can finish solving this by taking the square root of both sides. But as we've learned in the past, a square root actually means plus or minus a square root. So we have x plus 7 equals plus or minus 8. And then you solve it by subtracting 7. Now we're going to take positive 8 minus 7, and that's 1. Negative 8 minus 7 is negative 15. And there's our solution. All right, let's try another one. Okay, let's see if this works. Can you take your b value, divide it by 2, and square it to get your c value? Yes, it works. So we do x. This time we're going to use minus. What number was squared? 2 was squared. And then you put your squared around the parentheses. And we've got 13. Okay, we're ready to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus or minus. So x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 13. That does not come out as a whole number or an integer, so we are just going to leave it as a square root of 13. So then to finish solving, you would add 2, and you would write your solution as 2 plus or minus the square root of 13. And that's as far as I need you to take that. So one way that you could check this is by doing one of the other ways that we've learned. And so you can put this in your calculator, and you can see that there are solutions right there and right here, and then there's a solution right there. That's just another way to double check that you're doing your answer correctly. And so you would figure out 2 plus square root of 13 on your calculator, and then 2 minus square root of 13, and see if that's the same thing you got when you graphed it. Okay, so sometimes that is not going to work right away, and we're going to have to figure out a c value. So what is our c value there? Well, we would take 12 divided by 2, which is 6, and then we'd have to square it, and that's what would go up for c. So in this case, c equals 36. And how would we write that as a perfect square trinomial? We would say x plus what was squared? 6. All right, so let's try one that does not work out nice. So when we start this problem, we would do 4 divided by 2 is 2, 2 squared. That does not equal 12. So that means that we don't want that 12 there. We're going to move it over. And so I'm going to add 12 to both sides. And make sure you leave that space there because we got to put a C value in there that actually works. If you have another colored pen, this would be good to write this one in a different colored pen so that you'd remember it more when you're taking your quizzes. So what worked here was 4, so we need to put plus 4. Now you can't just add 4 to one side of an equation because the equation has to be equal on both sides. Just adding 4 upsets the balance. So we have to balance it by adding 4 to the other side as well. All right, so now let's go back and put it in our parentheses. This would be x plus, what was squared to make the 4? 2 was. And then on the other side you get 16. And then you take the square root of both sides. You get x plus 2 equals plus or minus 4. Then you subtract 2. And x equals 4 minus 2 is 2. Negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. And that's our answer. All right, so those were okay because they didn't have an a value other than 1. Now we have an a value other than 1. So that makes it a little bit more complicated. So what we're going to do is divide everything by 3. So those cancel out and you get x squared minus 2/3 x minus 1/3 equals 0. Now we look to see, is our 1/3 what we want there? So what is 2/3 divided by 2? So 2/3 divided by 2. If you're not really sure how to do that, go ahead and do it on your calculator. So you would type in 2/3 in parentheses, and then divide that by 2, and then press math fraction. So that's 1/3. And then if you square that, does it equal that number right there? Well, obviously 1/3 squared does not equal it, but we'll need to know what it is. So then we can just press the squared key so it squares our answer. And it is 1/9 is what we really need there. So we're going to rewrite this. X squared minus 2/3 x. We don't want that 1/3, so we're going to move it over to the other side by adding 1/3 to both sides. What we wanted instead was 1/9. Again, if you have a different color pen, put that in a different color to help you remember that that was something you added to the equation. Okay, so then we have x minus, what number was squared to make 1/9? 1/3 was squared. Equals 1/3 plus 1/9. Again, if you can't do this in or on your own, go ahead and use your calculator. 1/3 plus 1/9. So that is 4/9. Take the square root. And we end up with x minus 1/3 equals plus or minus. Now, when you take the square root, it's like you're taking the square root of 4 over the square root of 9. So that is 2/3. And then you add 1/3 to continue solving it. X equals 2/3 plus 1/3 is just a whole. Negative 2/3 plus 1/3 is negative 1/3. Again, if you can't do that in your head, just rely on your calculator, that's fine. That's our answer. And now the last one that we're going to do, at least I think it's last. Yes, this is the last one we're going to do, is with imaginary solutions. So in the last lesson, we learned about imaginary numbers. And those come in from when we have to take the square root of a negative number. And that can happen sometimes. So if we look at this one, we start by doing 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is not 11. So we have to go x squared plus 4x, get rid of the 11 by subtracting it off of both sides. And the number we really wanted there was 4. So we could rewrite that as x plus 2 squared equals -7. Then we'll take the square root of both sides. So we get x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of -7. Continue solving this by subtracting 2. So x equals -2 plus or minus. Now the problem is that you can't give me an answer as the square root of a negative number. So we have to get rid of that negative by pulling out an I and then do the square root of 7. Again, put this I in front of the square root so it doesn't look like it's underneath the square root. But that's as far as we can go. All right, so that completes completing the square. Make sure you write down if you have any questions and do your summaries. And let me know if you have any questions when you get to class tomorrow.